House in Baltimore, headed off to Fenway Park this weekend, and some fake football here on Saturday night. Vic Carucci does all things NFL and has for as long as I've known him. He's writing books about Bum Phillips and the son of Bum, Wade Phillips, and doing all things Bills as the Bills come in here this weekend. I guess, Vic, I'll tell you this, man, it's a little bit of a mystery to us, all these teams. I thought I'd see a better version of the Dolphins, a better version of the Redskins. We're waiting for our offense. It's a weird time, and I know new coaching and knew a lot of things up there in Buffalo. You got your hands full, Vic Carucci, don't you?
Yeah, definitely another transition for the Buffalo Bills. That's what happens when you don't snap this perpetual playoff drought that is extended now to 17 years.
Ooh.
So they did make the changes at the top. New head coach and Sean McDermott, bringing him from Carolina, former defensive coordinator. They hire a new general manager in Brandon Beane, also a former Panther. So, yeah, it's a revamp their secondary, brand new. I mean, all four starters are different and new to the team, or at least potentially, at least three are new to the team, and that's what happens. Like you say, when you're not winning, you make changes.
Well, in the case, if you could sum up the Rex era as to what has gone wrong, and certainly the ownership there, the owner and his wife have been very hands-on, very involved in a lot of things around there, and Rex was kind of handpicked, as was the whole front office. They hit the eject button pretty quickly there, I think, and I'm not saying it's for the better or worse, we'll find out, but there has been a quick trigger finger there to eject what they've brought in, right?
Well, I would say when you make a change like Rex, the new ownership, because they're the ones that hired him, they did not hire his predecessor, Doug Marrone, nor did they fire him. Doug quit on them after the 2014 season. They would have been happy to keep him around after that 9-7 finish, and frankly did not want to deal with a coaching change in what was barely their it wasn't even a first full year as owners of the team. With Rex, he did the classic, or made the classic, I guess, mistake that all of us are told not to make, especially in a business environment, and that is he overpromised and underdelivered. He promised that this would be a playoff team, that this defense would be even better than it was in 2014 when it ranked 4th overall, and he came in 15 and said, number one is where we're going to take this. Well, they went to 19th in defense the last 2 years. They won 8 games his first season. They won 7 his second year, and he wasn't even around for the finale, was fired before the final game against the Jets at the end of last season. And so to call it a quick trigger is for sure accurate, but in terms of what they were looking at, I honestly understand that there was a lack of discipline. There was a lack of accountability. There was really a disorganized mess in many ways. And I just think what this showed in Rex's second stint as a head coach is that outstanding defensive coach. We know the work he did in Baltimore. I admired that work. I think I know he had some, obviously those back-to-back AFC title game appearances with the Jets, but largely with Eric Mangini's team that he inherited. But as a head coach, I just don't think that was his cup of tea.
He is Vic Carucci. He covers all things National Football League. You've heard him on Sirius XM as well as up there at the Buffalo News, and has been covering the Bills for many, many years. He also has a book with Wade Phillips called Son of Bum, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. All right, so look, man, we're a mess around here, right? Especially offensively, trying to figure out who's going to be on the line, how we're going to keep Flacco upright, when he's going to get upright, how we're going to run the ball, and certainly that's been a problem through the first 2 weeks with a backup quarterback in Ryan Mallett. But defensively, I think you're going to see a pretty good look here on Saturday night as the always important third preseason game feels like, some semblance of real football for the first 8, 10, 12 minutes, whatever it is. I think you're certainly going to see that from the Ravens defense. What are we going to see from the Bills here on Saturday night? What are they trying to accomplish here in these waning days of training camp?
Well, I think their number one goal would be to clean up their act. They had 15 penalties against the Eagles last Thursday night, 6 that weren't accepted. So 21 flags they made fly, or 21 times they made flags fly in that game. And that is a problem for a disciplinarian like Sean McDermott, who was upset with the 10 penalties called against his team in the preseason opener against Minnesota the week before. So that would be step one. I think step two is seeing a much more consistently effective and cleaner performance by the offense, and especially the passing game. Tyrod Taylor struggled mightily. I mean, he was awful against the Eagles. Had a 12 quarterback rating. 12, 1-2.
That's not good.
He threw two. That's not good,
That's
Nestor.
not good.
2 interceptions, nearly had a third, and the one of those interceptions was by Ronald Darby, the former Bill, who was traded to Philadelphia about a week before that game. And that's the other thing. In the aftermath, the theme of this preseason has really been upheaval that hasn't stopped, because they traded away Sammy Watkins, arguably their most talented player, or certainly right up there with LaShawn McCoy, who has been their most effective player. The wide receiver they traded to the Los Angeles Rams, Watkins. And they, as I mentioned, they traded away Darby. So 2 exceptional players, and end up with second and third round draft picks in return, plus a couple of players. Jordan Matthews at receiver for the Eagles, from the Eagles. He's not going to play against the Ravens. He's still dealing with a injured sternum. And E.J. Gaines is a corner they got from the Rams, who's in the rotation, but probably going to be a reserve player. But then they got hit with a punch to the gut the other day. As you know, Anquan Boldin, and a former Raven among other teams, walked away from football, decided after 14 years he was done, and after only 2 weeks in Buffalo. He had it and felt there were bigger things for him to do in life, and cited the events of Charlottesville. I got a chance to talk with him on Sirius yesterday, on Sirius Radio yesterday, and that's what he told me, that this was not a sudden decision, and that the events of recent weeks in Charlottesville prompted his thinking to say that I better get on to some very serious issues in this country, that there's never been a bigger divide socially, and he feels that he can do his part to help that. So I also think, from a very practical football standpoint, he looked every bit like a 36, almost 37-year-old receiver in Philly. That was his first preseason outing. Obviously, he had barely had any camp, no off season with any team. So let's throw those factors in there. Still didn't have any timing with Tyrod Taylor, but he looked slow, and he looked he did not look like a guy necessarily ready to step into it and make an impact. Although he said he still has the passion to play. But his decision to retire is final.
Vic, it is interesting you bring that up, because I've seen that here, right? At the end for Derek Mason, what the end even looked like for the late Michael Jackson. We go back, and he passed on us earlier this year. But for wide receivers, I've also seen Steve Smith come in here when there's nothing left to prove other than trying to win a championship, and believed he could do that here, coming back from a heinous injury to come back and try it again. And this time of the year to have sort of doubting Thomases, and where's the heart, and where, what you have to do to be fast and smart and creative and strong at 34, 5, 6. Hey, I saw Shannon Sharp, and he wasn't even at the end. He went back and got himself another ring, later on. Right. And it is very difficult. And I would say in the case of Boldin, were the Bills counting on him in any way? Because, hey, believe me, his name got brought up here, as it always does, the last 6 months, because we gave him away. He had a couple more 1,000-yard seasons out in San Francisco, and that's been a sore spot here, much like Dilfer was a sore spot here 15 years ago, that people talk about Anquan Boldin here. He's got a ring in his pocket that's got a purple bird on it, and, he's well thought of here.
Yeah, and he was well thought of when he arrived in Buffalo. He's not so much anymore, because people do feel he walked out on them. As noble as his reasons sounded, there's still a feeling that he left his team in the lurch, because, again, Watkins was on the team when he arrived, and then got traded shortly thereafter, after his arrival. And that raised the question, too, did Anquan Boldin say, this isn't the Bills team that I signed up for, that it changed dramatically as soon as I got here virtually, so why am I still here? And he saw the struggles of Tyrod Taylor as well. You wonder if those things played into it. He insisted to me they did not. But you still wonder and you still ask the question. And as far as him coming to the team and what was expected of him, I believe the Bills coaches and Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane were realistic about what a receiver who will turn 37 in October can bring to you. But his years, his production last year, 67 catches with Detroit last year, Nestor, he looked like a guy who could, of course, still play because he keeps himself in great shape, because of his experience and savvy, his knowledge, dependable hands. I mean, there's a lot to like about physically what he can still bring to the table.
Yeah, they believe he'd catch 50 balls there, right? Kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah, and make him, and also bring that exceptional personality and leadership to the perspective, to the locker room, to a young group of players.
He is Vic Carucci. He brings all that, as well as a longtime Bills follower and cover of Buffalo News, as well as at Sirius XM. You know his work. You can find him at Vic Carucci out on Twitter as well. Dude, I'm a baseball fan, and I know you run the gamut as well. And we're here in Baltimore, and I'm watching the Red Sox and the Yankees sort of put this thing back together again, and that's got to be what it feels like, because we've had that here for a decade and a half until the last few years with this Patriot thing. We talked to people in Miami all last week, and obviously the Jets are where they are, and part of that is self-inflicted and Rex-inflicted and organizationally and ownership-wise. But when something exemplary is happening, and I know they've cheated in the past, and I'm sure they'll cheat in the future up in Foxborough, and will be accused of all that and a bag of donuts as well. But it's really, really tough when they're expected to go 19-0 this year, and the Bills haven't made the playoffs in 17 years, and you're trying to figure out 8-8 or 9-7 somehow, some way, right? I mean, we have that in Baltimore this year with Pittsburgh. It feels like they're a lot better than we are. That's a tough place to be in August when you have so many question marks, and you go out there and, as you said, you can't even line up right last week, right?
No, it's very, very tough to have that in the division for all the teams, of course. That's the gold standard. It's the gold standard for the league, but to have it right in your division is daunting before you even start playing, to know that that mountain is one that you're going to struggle to scale. So I think that factors into the thinking of all the teams in the division. I think you try to build your team accordingly to get pressure on Tom Brady, first and foremost. And I think that's where, if the Bills feel good about anything, it's that Sean McDermott, with his defensive pedigree and a simpler scheme that I think these players needed after struggling with a more complex 3-4 of Rex Ryan. This is more of a straightforward 4-3 base that they can perhaps fare better against the Patriots, but it's always a huge and daunting task.
Vic, for you and expectations and where it is here for McDermott this year, and obviously just the change in that leadership has to be a very difficult transition. I know they've dealt out some players. They've dealt out two different sets of players, as you've pointed out. What are your expectations for this group this year? And give me some optimism here on the Bills at this point. Well, what looks good or what feels good right now?
I think the defense is really solid. I think the kicker, Stephen Hauschka, should be an upgrade. He looks like he's popping through these 50-plus yarders like they're nothing. And he's experienced, and I think that's always valuable for the kicking game. I think they have competent leadership in their coach, but I do want to see a cleaner play in these final two games from a penalty standpoint and see whether that does resonate. LaShawn McCoy is phenomenal and looking better than ever. He might even be better approaching 29, or at 29 years old, I should say, that he was at, say, 25. He's incredible, in incredible shape, running with a great sense of purpose and explosiveness. But I do think the realistic expectations are that this is a building year, that this is some would suggest it's a tank year. I don't know that they've gone that far, because I think if you're keeping Tyrod Taylor around or figuring out how to do that, he took a $10 million pay cut to stick around. That doesn't qualify as tank, but they do have a rookie, Nathan Peterman. Look, it'll be interesting to see how he does. He played well he moved quickly up the charts to the second team quarterback, surpassing TJ Yates, to move into that second spot behind Taylor. And I think you'll get a good look at him in the second half of this game against the Ravens. And he, for the future, could be interesting, but they've stockpiled picks. They have 6, and this might be the most optimistic thing that I can say about the Bills, 6 draft picks in the first 3 rounds of the 2018 draft. That gives it 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds. That gives them the opportunity to do, I think, a lot of things, not the least of which is packaging their way up to get a quarterback. And I believe they're going to need one. I don't think they have him on the roster. I think Peterman is interesting, came to them as a 5th-round pick from Pitt, but I think they are looking at a brighter future through the draft.
Hey, Vic, I'm going to get you back on later on, and we're just going to talk about the book, because I've always been a little intimidated by Wade Phillips because of his dad, and I had Bum on the show one time. It was one of those, really cool. I've done radio 25 years. I can tell you about the time John Wooden called in or the time I talked to Bum Phillips as pretty special times. You wrote this book. Just real quickly on the book, because I want to expound on it next time we chat, man, because I know your time's short.
It's called Son of Bum. And it's available anywhere books are sold. Go to Amazon would probably be the simplest way, and obviously there's a digital and audio version as well. But Wade Phillips' tribute to his dad, and also talking about his unique career where he played for his father as a high school coach, and then in college at the University of Houston when Bum was a defensive coordinator there. Bum's relationship with Bear Bryant and a lot of the innovation that Bum brought to the game. And then just tracing through the coaching influence in a very long and successful career by Wade from his dad, just starting with that and as working with him and then following through with some really good insights and Jerry Jones, working with the Cowboys and working around various stops that he's had in the league. New Orleans, Atlanta, San Diego, you name it, Denver. It's a pretty big map. Buffalo, and now, of course, the Los Angeles Rams. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of meat there.
Son of Bum, lessons my dad taught me about football and life. Hey, dude, I'm going to let you go. I'll just say this. I ran into Wade Phillips one time in my life in a hallway at one of these owners' meetings, and I said to him, I loved your dad. He said, I've heard that before. So,
Good stuff, man.
Great having you on, Vic. Be well. Vic Carucci, my man, up in Buffalo. He's got a role. He's got Sirius XM duties there. You can check him out at Vic Carucci. That's 1 R, 2 C's, and, of course, out there with the Son of Bum book, which can be purchased via the Give a Spit app, and helping our friends at There Goes My Hero at Amazon.com as well with Wade Phillips. Lessons my dad taught me about football and life. Boy, I could write that about my dad, too. I've written about my dad. That's a pretty good title. I like that. Vic Carucci joining us here talking all things Bills. We got fake football on Saturday. Luke is out on the fields all week. I'll be joining him as well. If there's any breaking news, you'll get it all first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, we're all waiting for Joe Flacco to be ready, not be ready. Who knows? But Ryan Mallett will be the guy this week, I'm sure, against the Bills. We'll keep you abreast of all of that. And, of course, the Orioles headed to Fenway Park this weekend to take on the Red Sox. We're going to be over in London next month at Wembley for the Sunday game, but we're throwing a Saturday party. If you're going to be over in London, tell your friends to come join. It's going to be a pretty interesting afternoon. We got a huge house party we're having at the Fox at XL. It's about 2 blocks away from the Emirates Air cable car. We're going to do a 2-block march. We're going to do a cable car purple ride over the Thames to the O2 Arena and go have a couple of pints and some fish and chips, celebrating an afternoon over in jolly old London on the east side of London. I went and researched that last month. It was tasty, delicious cold, not so affordable. I mean, London's a lot of things. London ain't cheap. But we did put a great trip together. We're taking a lot of folks over. We hope that you join us as well. You can email me, nasty@WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Anything you miss here, you can find out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. And, of course, our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com, where it's always $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.